Hello, 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 hello. This is Jenny Yang. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our very special panel Q&A to talk about first vote. If you're watching us, then I'm excited because it is 5 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 p.m. on the East Coast. You could be doing other things, but you're here looking at me, pretending I'm at a cafe, being social. But today we have an awesome panel. I just finished watching First Vote, and I have so many questions, y'all. Chinese for Trump, so many interesting interview subjects and documentary subjects. This is the first ever, okay, Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival virtual showcase presented by Visual Communications. I have been to many Asian Pacific Film Festivals, and none of them have been like this. Usually it's to like rub elbows, literally, but now we're gonna do sort of a Brady Bunch version of that, right? So 2020, what can you say? So it's presented by, of course, Visual Communications. We love them. From celebrating our histories and cultures to mobilizing our communities to be socially and politically active, we present the virtual showcase to keep us connected. And thank you, Visual Communications, for doing that, because I remember thinking this year when everything got locked down, I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen to the Asian Pacific Film Festival? Like, I take it for granted. It's something I look forward to in Los Angeles. So speaking of which, you might know today is Giving Tuesday, hashtag Giving Tuesday, if you're into that kind of stuff. On this day of giving for the rest of May, please consider making a gift to Visual Communications so that we can continue to empower communities through media. Y'all, it is the 5th day of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. You're here for a reason. Why don't you just clickety-click real quick? You know what I mean? vconline.org and give to Visual Communications, because they're doing this for us, y'all. Okay, so before I introduce today's panelists real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to those who helped make this showcase possible. Keep the lights on. Comcast, NBC Universal, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Nielsen, HBO, Warner Media, National Geographic. That's a new one. I like that. And then Visual Communications would also like to thank our community partners who've helped build audience around this program. Now, it's a long list, but I'm a fast talker and I'm gonna do it. You can time me, someone time me right now and let me know how long this takes. Ready? Go. Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Asian CineVision, Asian American International Film Festival, Asian American Documentary Film Network, Austin Asian American Film Festival, Boston Asian American Film Festival, Chicago Foundation for Asian American Independent Media, Chinese American Museum, DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon, OCA Greater Houston, HAAPI Fest, Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival, Pacific Arts Movement, San Diego Asian American Film Festival, Seattle Asian American Film Festival, Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival, Tuesday Night Project, Vancouver Asian Film Festival. Time.
Wow.
Oh. Anyone got time? Okay, anyway, we'll check it out. Thank you for support. So today, back to the program, this is our discussion about First Vote. That's the name of the documentary film. It is a feature-length documentary directed by Yi Chen, or if you're keeping score in Mandarin, Chen Yi, chronicling the democratic participation of 4 Asian American voters from 2016 through the 2018 midterm elections in the South and Midwest. Today marks the film's world premiere. What? Let's clap it up. Let's meet our panelists. Yes. So today's the film's world premiere. We're doing it. We're premiering it today. Okay. So this is we're just gonna do it starting with the director. First, let's welcome Yi Chen. Yi Chen is the documentary filmmaker based in Washington, D.C., and her work explores the intersection of racial justice, immigration, and democracy. Everyone, please welcome Yi Chen. Yay. Yay.
Thanks for having me.
Yay. Congratulations on this accomplishment. Next, from the film, one of our documentary subjects, one of our stars, is Kaiser Guo, or Kuo. You know,
I prefer
Guo is great. Guo is great. Kaiser is a native of upstate New York and a graduate from UC Berkeley. He served as the Director of International Communications for China's leading search engine, BAID. I need to get familiarized with that one. He is host of the Sinica podcast, Sinica?
Sinica.
All right, I got that right the first time. A weekly current affairs podcast that has run since 2010. Everyone welcome Kaiser Guo, please. Come on, everyone. Yes. And by the way, when he does this, and it looks like a virtual background of a rock star, no, he is an actual rock star. That's why his background looks like that. Next, also from the film, please welcome Jennifer Ho. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
Hi, Jennifer is the director of the Center for the Humanities and the Arts at the University of Colorado Boulder, where she's also holds an appointment as a professor in the Ethnic Studies department. Shout out to Ethnic Studies, because that's has created the foundation of who I am. She is also the president of the Association of Asian American Studies. Wait, what? You're the president of the Association for Asian American Studies? That's cool.
Yep, and look at my t-shirt.
Yes, it's an honor just to be Asian. And the author of 3 scholarly monographs. Now, today, finally, our final panelist, we also welcome Christopher Hastings. Hello, everyone. Let's welcome Chris Hastings. Hello.
Hello.
Christopher Hastings, yes, is the executive in charge and serves as the executive producer and editorial manager of World Channel and worldchannel.org at PBS's flagship producing station, WGBH Boston. As executive producer, he is co-curator of the award-winning documentary series America Reframed, Local, USA, and Doc World, and has provided editorial oversight to most other original series on World. Let's give our panelists an applause. Listen, it's a huge ramp up, but it's gonna pay off. This is a huge ramp up, it's gonna pay off. So this film, First Vote, I just finished it today. Here's some basic facts in case you caught it or not, because you can stream this virtual showcase of the film until later tonight, even after this panel. So if you haven't seen it, let me just give you a little context. Here are a couple of points that just to frame what this is about, because this is about Asian American voters, right? What blew me away, the way you set up this documentary, were these couple of points. First, apparently, I did not know this, in 1952, and this is I majored in poli-sci and policy in college. I went to Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia. I wrote my graduate paper on it. I did not know this. 1952, federal law, until then, federal law prohibited Americans of Asian descent from voting. What? 1952? Okay, see, that blew my mind. And then number 2, the second point is in 2016, 1/3 of Asian American voters were first-time voters. So, you know, I would love to talk to you, Yi, first about like what, given this context, like these 2 pieces of information that you introduced this documentary with, you know, what motivated you to take on this documentary subject?
Yeah, so these are actually, once I started research, like I was also like surprised to find out these facts. But I started out the project late 2016, early 2017, because I read an article on The Economist about this Chinese Americans for Trump movement. And, you know, it really challenged my assumptions about Asian American voters. But on the other hand, I was, you know, a little bit of my background, I came here, I was born and grew up in Shanghai, and I came here as an immigrant. And I was becoming an American citizen. So I actually became a citizen last year. And I'm going to be voting for the first time, thank you, this year. So
what?
Yeah, so right. So when I read about that, you know, I was really curious because one hand, it challenged my assumptions about Asian American voters, because, you know, I've lived in DC since 2005. But on the other hand, you know, I was intrigued by this very active and passionate participation in the democratic process from this Chinese immigrant group, which I am part of. That I haven't before that, you know, I haven't seen such strong interest in, you know, participating in civic engagement. So, so that's what I kind of started looking into that, and that's how the project got started.
That's amazing. And can you tell me sort of some of the first steps you took to getting involved and getting to know this sort of population of voters? I mean, did you hop on that WeChat?
Yes, that was on WeChat.
Tell me about that. Tell me about your WeChat. If people don't know, WeChat is the way a lot of mainland Chinese, I mean, also overseas Chinese, you know, communicate. It's like the dominant sort of like app for communicating. People post on it kind of like Facebook, but they also use it mostly for messaging. It's everything. you can pay for things on it, you know. So can you tell like give us a little glimpse? 'Cause I feel like it's such an important organizing tool that I've been curious about. What did you learn in trying to get connected with these sort of Chinese Americans for Trump type of folks?
Yeah, I mean, it took a while, really. It took about 6 months to find the two, Lance and Sue, the two characters. I was specifically looking for characters in battleground states.
Yep.
So I didn't know any member of that movement. So just through friends I know, just introduced me to people, and they added me to these WeChat groups.
Yeah.
So I started going to some of their events, and I started to, talking to some of them and interviewing them. I talked to a lot of people, but most of them didn't want to be in a documentary.
Right.
But there are a couple of them in Virginia told me that they actually listened to this podcast. This guy in Ohio has this podcast that they listen to. So they told me about, there are a couple of people told me about them. So that's how I found Lance.
Because it's Lance's podcast. So everyone else was like, oh, we listen to this guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And
who talks from a Chinese American conservative perspective, GOP perspective.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I found Kaiser because he wrote an article about, I think the title of the article is why so many first generation Chinese immigrants are supporting Trump. So he actually wrote an article. So that's how I found Kaiser.
Right. And then how did you, I mean, since you're going down the list, how did you find the rest of the subjects?
Well, Sue is known within the Chinese immigrant community because she ran for office in 2016. So she was already.
How do you say her name? Googe?
Sue Googe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So she was already.
Googe.
Yeah. So she was already a public figure at that time.
Right.
And I met.
Fascinating. Yeah. Go ahead.
And I met Jennifer actually at a conference. It's an Asian American storytellers in the South. It's hosted by Kim and UNC TV. So Jennifer gave a keynote speech there. So that's how I met Jennifer.
That's amazing. We should call you Professor Ho, because listen, you earned it.
No, Jennifer's really fine. Thank you.
We need all the honorifics. Jennifer's great. Okay, so that's fascinating to me. I know we do want to acknowledge that a couple of the other interview subjects or the documentary subjects are not on this panel. I already put my hat in the ring. I am so down to host another panel involving Sue Googe and Lance. What's Lance's last name?
Lance Chen.
Lance Chen, the GOP Chinese Americans. I love that. Yeah, I was really blown away by sort of their take on why they are motivated to vote for Trump and be GOP. Let's go to Kaiser and Jennifer. Before we talk about your stories, what was your impression after watching the documentary? I'm assuming you've watched the documentary, and sort of what did you learn about the quote unquote other side? Because I definitely have some of my conclusions after watching the documentary.
Yeah, so I tried to watch it with an open mind. These were both known entities to me. I've sort of known about them for a while as well. One of them actually ran for Congress in a district where I live. So, she was frequently making public appearances here in Chapel Hill. Yeah. And, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I thought they might be able to explain their bizarre political predilections maybe more cogently, but they didn't. I mean, I think it just really reaffirmed for me everything that I had originally suspected, that their conservatism, their support for Trump is really not as much a reflection of conditions in America as they are in the China that they left. I think that this is something that I'm afraid didn't come across as much as I would have liked it to in the documentary. But I think that with them and with many of the political conservatives who come from mainland China, it's really a reflection of the kind of hyper-competitive, social Darwinian, sort of brutal and amoral ethos in the China of the reform and opening period, especially of more recent years, where there's this sort of
Wow.
unbridled, competition. And it's
Interesting.
like, I'm going to fuck you before you fuck me. And I don't care who I need to screw, I'm going to climb. They come here, and it's the American dream in a lot of ways, but they want their children to get ahead. They want to put their kids in good universities, and like every good Chinese parent does. But for them, affirmative action represents a major impediment to that, and so they're so narrowly focused on that I think it's really the front and center issue for them, and they talk about it in the film. But I mean, it really is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was blown away by sort of their explanation of how they come from socialism. They thought egalitarian would be good in America, probably, but then that started to smell
bullshit.
like socialism, and we wouldn't want that. Jennifer, what did you kind of learn about the other side, so to speak?
So first of all, I just want to really compliment Yi, because this is such a strong, powerful documentary that I think will also, that I hope finds its way into classrooms, K through 12 classrooms, definitely college and university classrooms. I really feel like, especially leading up to the November 2020 election, like this is a film that really should be seen to as wide an audience as possible, because I actually think it does present a range of perspectives about what it means to be Chinese American, what it means to vote as a Chinese American. In a lot of ways, I feel like my story is the most anomalous. So unlike the other subjects and characters, like I speak neither Mandarin nor Cantonese. My parents are, I have a refugee father and an immigrant mother, but my mom's an immigrant from Kingston, Jamaica. So my own story, my own family story is different from the kind of traditional Chinese immigrant story to the United States. And I also would say that probably my guess is I'm probably the only one of the four of us where my primary identification is as an Asian American, and my secondary identification is to be Chinese American.
Oh, interesting.
That in other words, like that, my commitment to social justice is so strong that I place my racial identity first, because in acknowledging my racial identity, I'm really recognizing the kind of history of white supremacy and institutional racism. And I think that's where, especially for me, what's interesting about Lance and Sue is that they've really bought into this notion of the American dream. They really bought into this model minority myth of Asian Americans, Chinese Americans, that all you need to do is to succeed and work hard and follow the law, and then the gates swing wide open. And I really feel like what I wish is that they would take a class of mine, right? Like what I want them to take an ethnic, or not just me, right? Like I'm not trying to promote me, but
I'm offering them a class.
I am. I'm offering like to give them a syllabus and a directed reading list. Like I want them to take an ethnic studies class, because I feel like if you understand how the United States was founded, if you understand where the wealth of the United States comes from stolen, occupied land of indigenous people, from enslaved labor of Africans who were forcibly taken into the United States, right? Of land stolen by Latinx people on the southern border. And then, the whole history of Asians in America. Like if you understand that truly, it's very hard to look away from that history of oppression and not come away and think, oh, okay, the United States is not the American dream for everyone. It's really been a nightmare for a substantial number of people over the past few centuries. So
I think
that would work for the fact-based community. Unfortunately, I think that in this case, it's personality and its character that drives it in both of their cases, and that's why I don't know that it would necessarily be any use for us to all four of us sit down and talk, or for them to even take a class of yours, because I think that there's an irreducible core with both of them that is selfish. That is,
Kaiser, you said it. I didn't.
No, I would say more. I would also say that there's an irreducible core in them that is racist. One of the things that I asked E many times to do, and I did it on camera, into the camera. I said, E, tell me, when you were interviewing them, and you interviewed them at great length, did they or did they not at many points ask you to turn the camera off and then start spouting stuff that was just intolerably racist. And she confessed to me a couple of times that, yeah, that they did. I wish that had made it in. I mean, because I think that that would be part of the truth that they're obscuring.
Oof.
Look, there is a casual equation among these people of blackness with criminality, of you know, being a Latinx person with being lazy, which is just baffling to me. It's just
well, we could probably keep talking about people who are not in the room, who are from the movie for the rest of this.
Yeah, let's do that.
But no, more specifically, can we talk about Jennifer? Let's start with you. When you were approached to be a part of this film project, what were your thoughts, and what was the thinking for you about saying yes to this?
You know, I really, for somebody who I think people assume I'm smart, I'm really sometimes not. So it wasn't until I actually saw the first screener that Yi sent that I realized, oh, I'm not just some talking head, I'm actually a subject in this film. Like that was when I fully kind of,
and well, because again, you're a PhD, you know, you're a professor, and so usually you're placed in this position of being an expert, which you are, but your personal story is also very important to give you a subjectivity, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, especially there's that footage of me and my husband and our corgi, and I was like, oh yeah, there's you know, this is like my personal life that's being shown. So I'd say my involvement initially was just, you know, Yi approached me and asked me if she could ask some questions, and then we had a phone conversation, and then she was headed to Chapel Hill to film Kaiser. And so, you know, we met up and she filmed me. And again, I thought it'd be like one of those Ken Burns things where, like, you know, there's the talking head scholar who like comes in and like, you know, explains the 1965 Immigration Act, and then that would be it. But then, you know, Yi and I hit it off, and she, you know, asked to visit my classes. And again, like, you'd think I would have figured out that that meant that I was going to be more of a subject in the film. Honestly,
that's
I just
how that
really
works, Jennifer. That's how it works. But you hook, line, and sinker, you know. Kaiser, how
but
about you? Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Yi is she's an extraordinarily skilled filmmaker, in that she's able to kind of pull out these stories without, at least for me, without even being aware that I was telling a story.
Right. That's great. Kaiser, how did you feel when you were approached? How were you approached?
Oh, I mean, I was eager to do it. I mean, I thought that the topic itself was fascinating to me, just as it was to see these. We were both sort of baffled. I think I was caught quite off guard when my wife started telling me about the enormous percentage of recent immigrants. And we figured it out pretty quickly that there was a dividing line, that people who'd been here, say 15 years or more, tended to still be very, very heavily Democratic, to vote very Democratic, and their children also. But people who had just immigrated within the last decade or so were skewing very conservative, especially people who were, you know, in their 40s and in their 50s. It was shocking to me. So when she asked, it was great. And it was easy for her to convince me. The tough sell, as Yi can talk about, was my wife. She had no interest in doing this. She just thought, you know, I don't want to, you know, talk about politics. I'm already having trouble making friends because of you and your Democrat.
Because Kaiser is such a anti-GOP, making it hard for me to get along with the local ladies.
That's right.
Oh man. And so yeah, I wanted to ask you, as a documentary filmmaker, I think Kaiser sort of brought up a very I don't know, interesting point. It's like, how do you as a filmmaker decide when to turn the camera off if, say, a documentary subject wants to not include it on camera, and what gets in the film?
I mean, obviously, if a character doesn't want to be filmed, then, you know, I wouldn't film them. So it's all with consent, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like sometimes people in who are outside of filmmaking, and we could go to Chris to talk about sort of documentaries in general and sort of this whole context, but like a lot of people don't understand that, like, documentaries, it's like people are not getting paid to be on camera. Like, this is not like an infomercial. It's not like a commercial.
We're not?
And so you're like, wait, I'm still waiting for my check.
Yeah, and I think it's the style of filmmaking. I think, you know, before I went to film school and took a history of documentary class at American University, I thought documentaries are sit-down interviews and narrations, right? but there are actually so many different approach to making documentary. And me specifically, as a filmmaker, I am interested in, I was really inspired by American direct cinema movement and films by Fred Wiseman. So for me, my own work, I take the observational approach, the cinema verite approach to, spend as much time as I can with characters and really get to know them and their life. I think it's a much more involved process. And also the process of making this film, it's also a journey of discovery for me. So what I started out, I had a question, I was curious, I wanted to learn. So it's also a journey for me, and the story evolved, the characters evolved, and all the way through the editing room, even the rough cut was really different from the final film. It's a very, it really is a process of figuring out, what is the story and what is this film. So yeah.
I'll ask you about what you learned through this process, but let's go to Chris. Chris, you are a veteran in the documentary world, and considering your work with this film as a producer, like, what did you see in this film that got you hooked and involved?
Representation. I mean, I think when we think about politics and we think about just participation, we need to be able to see that Asian Americans, Chinese Americans are participating, whether they come from the right or from the left. When we think about conservatives, we think of them as Southern white folks in North Carolina. Well, there are people of color who are also conservatives. And so the representation that I saw in this film was something that I hadn't necessarily seen on screen. And for us, within public media, we kind of felt like it was important to get involved early. Center for Asian American Media, who was one of Yi's original funders with ITBS, I think they were the first to sort of see that there was something here, that you got to see people of color in their personal spaces being political, and they were Asian. And so that was something that I haven't seen a lot of in documentary, in media. I mean, think about it. This was, what are we, 2020, and Andrew Yang was running for president. And so we hadn't seen that before. And so the timing is right to let people know that, Asian Americans are rising in terms of population, growing within people of color representation. And so this film, for what Yi did, she captured something that is happening in small spaces around America, and we all need to see it.
Yeah. And so for those of you who aren't yet familiar, Chris, can you tell us about America Reframed and World Channel, because they are really good homes for documentaries?
So World Channel is based at WGBH in Boston. It's a platform that is part of the PBS system. And essentially we are an expansion of public media. We started America Reframed about 8 years ago. Tonight actually is our season 8 premiere of America Reframed. And we showcase documentaries from all over America that features underrepresented populations, communities of untold stories, and we do that year round. And so working with our partners at ITBS, the Center for Asian American Media, Tempen, all people who have worked with Yi over the past couple of years, we are excited to work with Yi on this film.
Yeah, it's so great. I mean, thank you, Yi, for explaining sort of the style of documentary filmmaking that you did, and sort of the time that you invested in really being a part of everyone's world, because I think you really saw that in the film. I like literally, the moment I saw the photo that was circulating about, Chinese Americans for Trump, I was like, where are they coming from? Like, that was like sort of how Kaiser probably reacted. I was like, where are these people coming from? Because I feel like some of it is, I could probably, as a sort of Chinese Taiwanese American, I could see probably maybe where they were coming from if I got a glimpse into it. And I felt like I did, because I do feel like you got to sort of show who they were more than just being at a rally, you know what I mean? Or being a shock jock. They're not shock jocks, they're radio people too. But
you also got to see them fondling their guns at home, right?
That's right. Hey, listen, I have family who own guns, and I was like, why are you owning guns? But it happens, and we got to see that. And so, Yi, why don't you tell us? Earlier, you're referring to the fact that, like, you know, through multiple edits, you had to sort of learn about yourself. And so, during this process, what do you feel like you learned, you know, for yourself when it came to sort of exploring this subject?
Yeah, so I started out, I think there are two main things I would say. One is, so when I read Kaiser's article, I realized how, you know, the divide in the country and in my own community actually affect people on a very personal level. So I went in the project really trying to explore, you know, the divide within the community. Yeah. But, you know, when I finished the film, or the process of it made me realize that the four characters actually share something in common, and they all said it, you know, in the film, that this desire to belong and this desire to be American. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I did not expect. So that's something that's unexpected. I would say the second thing is, I also learned a lot more about who I am, my own identity. Because coming to this country as an immigrant, you know, I went to graduate school, so I didn't have a chance to take Asian American Studies class, right? Yeah. So throughout this whole process, going to Jennifer's classes and reading the books that she was teaching, I learned a lot more about you know, me becoming Asian American, becoming an American, what does it mean to be Asian in America? So I would say my own racial formation and understand my own identity. Now I've become American citizen. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So are you Asian American?
Yes.
I probably identify more with Asian American, but I was born in Taiwan. And so I feel like that's always a constant, I feel like it's a constant conversation with yourself. No, Jennifer? I feel like, why don't I ask you this about sort of where we are at now that we're, you know, when you shot this was pre-pandemic. Woo! And now we got Trump calling it the Chinese virus, you know, Kung flu. We got jokes. We got jokes out there about the virus. You know, how are you feeling about sort of like the Asian American response to Trump now?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I feel like a lot of Asian American study scholars are being called on to be interviewed, because somehow the mainstream press has all of a sudden realized, oh wait, Asians are not white and they're getting harassed and they're facing racism and we need to do stories. So I've done, I think, like 3 or 4 different interviews in the last month. Yeah, I think largely because I'm president of the Scholarly Association of Asian American Studies. And also about a month ago, I developed a PowerPoint. So I wanted to answer this question. Like, people kept saying, like, if we say Spanish flu, why can't we say Chinese virus, right? Like, that's where it originated. So I decided to, as an educator, to take that question seriously. Yeah. And to develop this PowerPoint. So if for anyone who's listening and you're interested, if you go to my Twitter feed at DRJENHO, at Dr. Jen Ho, my pinned tweet will show you the PowerPoint, and you can fill out a Google form and I'll email you a copy of the PowerPoint slide deck, which you are free to edit and, you know, use in whatever way you want.
And what's the purpose of that again?
So I just wanted to educate people. I wanted to educate people about why the phrase Chinese virus is racist in the year 2020.
Amazing.
And in order to do that, you have to understand a history of Chinese American, Asian American discrimination. So it starts with talking about a definition of racism, and then it goes on to give a very brief history of Asian Americans. It talks about two very, I would say, infamous cases of the murder of Vincent Chin, and then the attacks on Muslim, Arab American, and South Asians in the wake of 9/11. Yeah. And then it leads to talking about why saying the phrase Chinese virus is racist in the year 2020. And it kind of ends with saying anyone can be an anti-racism educator, and here's how to get started. And then it ends with a list of books. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for, providing a resource. I love that. Taking action. Kaiser, how about you? What do you think now with sort of Trump's response, how the Chinese Americans are feeling him or not?
Yeah, I mean, one would think if this were a world where people behaved rationally, that even those people who were ardent supporters of Trump would realize now, with some 1,500 documented incidences just since that first press conference where we started using the phrase Chinese virus, incidents of verbal or even physical attacks, including the stabbings of people who, by the way, were not even ethnically Chinese or not even ethnically East Asian. You would think that they would have figured out that if somebody is going to, stand there with a brick in one hand and maybe an epithet cocked on their tongue, they will hold back on neither the brick nor the epithet to ask you first, wait, are you actually Chinese or are you Japanese? Oh, if you're Japanese, I'm not going to throw the brick. Are they going to ask you, are you a supporter of the Chinese Communist Party? Are you a Communist Party member? No, of course not. They're going to fucking throw the brick and call you chink, right? Yeah. And they're going to tell you go back to China. So even now, if you go on to Weibo and you talk, all these people, nobody has changed their mind. Okay. Nobody has changed their mind. I mean, instead, what are they saying? They're saying, this is the time where we need to wrap ourselves in the American flag. Go out and proudly wear your MAGA hat. This is the time where, we need to show them that we don't support the evil Chinese communists. It's just nonsense. And they need Jen's class, obviously, but I'm afraid it really isn't a damn thing for them. I think, short of the brick, probably not much will change their minds.
Yeah. Anyone else, Yi or Chris, want to take that question of sort of Asian Americans now with Trump under COVID-19?
Yeah. Anyway, it's a depressing topic, isn't it?
Well, it's a depressing topic, but it's one of those things where you would hope that the overt racism brings people out politically to participate. And so we can look at the sadness that we're looking at and things that are happening, but you would hope that this experience and just seeing that overt racism brings people out to vote. One of the things that happened in 2016, there were just people who didn't participate. And so I think it's important that if we're not liking what we're feeling, if we're not liking what we're seeing, it's important that we get people participating even more in 2020.
Yeah, for sure. And then we have maybe another 10 minutes. We'll do a final kind of round of questions. Yi, we had a question from our audience. They were wondering if Suge, that could be a nice little, sort of combined nickname for her. Sugu, their reactions were to it.
Yeah, so Lance has seen the film, and I initially was gonna watch it with Sue a few days ago, but she had to reschedule it. So I'm watching it with her this week. So Lance actually, he actually really liked the film.
Yeah, it opens with him. He's a star.
I mean, we didn't really have a lengthy conversation, but he was very excited after he watched it, and he actually called me right after he finished watching it, and he liked it actually.
Yeah. I feel like you can really see in those little moments of Lance engaging with either a Pence dinner or a Trump situation, how much pride he takes in being able to connect with the GOP leaders and the sort of GOP rock stars. How deep and passionate he is into the cause.
Yeah, so and he also said, I think one thing I was glad to hear is that he wants to have a conversation with Kaiser and actually learn more about why Kaiser, is a Democrat. So, I mean, I feel like the fact that he's open to have a conversation, with someone who has very different political views from him, it's encouraging to me. To be able to kind of bridge two sides and hopefully they can have a conversation,
right,
in some ways.
I mean, I haven't really sort of editorialized, but in terms of like, because I'm trying to be a good moderator, but I have to say, my reactions to this film, number one, yeah, thank you for putting together a beautiful film that was very insightful on these different characters and sort of the range of reactions to voting and political participation. But as I was alluding to earlier, I'm Chinese Taiwanese. I still speak Mandarin pretty well. The news is challenging to me. That's like another level. But people are surprised when they find out because they think I'm so Americanized that I'm actually very immigrant and still do tons of very archaic sort of like rituals during like lunar holidays. But I was raised to be told from very young age. I memorized San Zi Jing. I memorized this classical Chinese poetry before age of 5 in order to work my mind and somehow probably be indoctrinated in some kind of Chinese culture. I was told by my father that I was Han Chinese. Remember, you're Han Chinese. You are Han Chinese. And I didn't know what that meant. Only later did I realize that was actually an ethnic group that was considered to be sort of more privileged and lighter skinned. And so there's actually, I mean, just think about it, you guys, come on. Han Chinese, there's and my dad tried to teach me like Tang Song Yuan, like all the different dynasties. And this is just to say, like, there's a part of me having been brought up being Chinese that it was inculcated in me to have a level of like Chinese supremacy, for lack of a better term. If that makes sense. There's actually very anti-Black and anti-other, and that is a very specific vision. Do you know what I mean? And I know you're shaking your head, Kaiser, but this is a little bit of what you were saying earlier.
No,
right?
no, I know. I mean, there's so
do you know
much.
What I'm talking? I mean, you guys
racism.
know what I'm talking about. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like I know, like I know the people. Like I know my people, and so for me, to see this documentary, it really truly does sort of, and I went to Taiwan every summer between age 5 and 14 because my dad worked for an airlines. I spent, I toured China for about 2 weeks with my food writer friend, eating food and kind of exploring a little bit. And that was very fascinating. This was like 5 years ago. And the sort of critique that Kaiser had around the soul of sort of the recent Chinese immigrants and sort of their mentality of this social Darwinian mentality, especially when it comes to affirmative action. Like, if we get in the door, we want to kick the door down and close it and shut it for everyone else. That is very disturbing to me. And so for me, honestly, your documentary reinforced that opinion of what's going on for me. I feel like people should watch the documentary and form an opinion themselves. But as someone who's Chinese Taiwanese and who had some of that learning and education and Chinese acculturation, I can see where the Chinese for Republicans versus Chinese for Democrats can diverge. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's something about the mentality that can kind of become conservative. And I think
what I hope people don't take away, though, is that all Chinese immigrants are that way. Are narrow. No. I mean, because I think by no means is that the case. Look, Chinese Americans still broke for Clinton in 2016 by 70%.
Yeah.
And if you, unfortunately, nobody has it quite as granularly as I would have liked, but it's obvious to me, just from the accumulation of anecdotal observation, that there's a generational divide. Younger Chinese who are, college students in the United States here, who came over either earlier or more recently than this crop that we're talking about, overwhelmingly are liberal or progressive.
Right. Yeah. And so anyway, that's just my little 2 cents. you know, because I'm here. And even though I'm hosting, I'm not a journalist, I'm a comedian. So we're gonna give you my opinions. Okay, so we're gonna wrap things up with the next 5 minutes. I think I would love to hear from Chris and from Yi, you know, what are the sort of, what do you want the audience to take away from this film, and then the logistical next steps of the film for us to know and keep track of your success and distribution? Yi or Chris, either one, if you want to start with that.
You go ahead, Yi.
Yeah, I mean, I hope this year, you know, it's an election year 2020. I hope the film will inspire more civic engagement, voter turnout in November. But also, you know, I'm really actually curious what people's takeaways are, because I'm always fascinated by people's reaction, very different reaction to a film. So yeah, and you know, I hope that it will give audience a better understanding of who, or start a conversation of who Asian Americans are, and have a deeper understanding of Asian American electorate, Asian American voters. Yeah.
The takeaway from the film, what do you want audiences to take away from the film, Chris?
That Yi is a rising director in this field.
Mad skills.
Like I'm 100% here to support Yi, and I want people to just sort of understand that behind the camera is just as important in front of the camera, and you need to keep an eye on this young lady as she continues to make films. As this film gets out here this summer, this fall, you know, pay attention to who she is. She's voting for the first time this year, and that's a part of the story. And so I think it's important to, as you look at this film, get to learn who this young woman is.
That's awesome. And so, yeah, I mean, today was the First Votes world premiere. I don't know why I couldn't get that out. First Votes world premiere. Where does it go next, and where can folks watch the film beyond until tonight, because that's still accessible, our virtual showcase?
I think we're figuring that out. I think she's got a few other festivals she's trying to work out, and we're trying to figure out when we're going to broadcast it. But I think right now, this is like the first sort of event. And I think we're still very much in the early stages of what we're going to do, right, Yi?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working together on an impact campaign and really engaging civic engagement organizations, and to bring this film to the ground, to do community screenings, and also working with scholars like Jennifer Ho to bring the film to classrooms as well. So yeah, and our website is firstvotefilm.com. So we'll be posting upcoming screenings, and we have resources on the website as well. And we have our next screening. So tonight's people can view it till 5 or 8 p.m. Pacific time, right? So they can still watch.
Still have some time.
Yes, and then so ChemFest is our next screening. It's on May 15th.
Awesome. May 15th, Center for Asian American Media, next screening, ChemFest, and then CAAMFEST. But then today, VC Online until 8 p.m. Pacific. Before we close it out, I actually would love to bring up two really important moments that I feel like kind of are just so insightful, and obviously couldn't be drawn out unless Yi sort of took that time to spend the time with the sort of documentary subjects. Yeah, before we close out with everyone's sort of websites and handles, Jennifer, all of that, you know, two moments. The first moment was, it was actually the moment that was featuring Kaiser's wife. Kaiser, what's your wife's name?
Fan.
How do you say that?
Fan.
Fun. Okay.
Yeah, Fan.
Cool. Fun. Okay. So it was a very poignant moment where Fan was interviewed, and she talked about her experience being an immigrant in America, saying that, you know, when she was in Beijing, she was thinking, okay, this is the segment where she said she thinks she might want to move back home after your kids are in college or out of the house, because when she was in Beijing, she got to be a Beijing person, and she was very, you know, really liked her life there. But in America, there is not that level of sort of identity, that the identity or pride, or I forgot what the exact word, because I was trying to listen to the Chinese as well as read the, you know, the translation. But here, there might be a little more prejudice, not as much of an understanding of, you know, her as a person and her identity.
That's right.
And I thought that was very poignant, because I feel like, as much as obviously she's married to you and she's still trying to sort of get along with the other Chinese Americans who might be more conservative, I feel like her experience highlights sort of that tension as immigrants have, that when you're not in the majority, and sometimes you're sort of forced into situations that are very tough when you want to connect and you want to have community, but sometimes they're different from you.
Yeah.
And it can, and I can imagine, she didn't say this, but I can imagine it can feel very lonely. And so you know, that to me was very poignant, and it highlighted some of this experience and what it means to sort of politically participate. And the other is the moment, and I don't know if we got her name, but she was one of the protesters that were the anti-GOP protesters in front of the convention center, and she cried. She teared up. She was holding a sign, and she was maybe, you know, in a generation above 40. I don't know, right? But she said that, you know, it really hurts her to see that there are Chinese and Asian Americans who support Trump, because she grew up being stoned and spit at for being different, growing up in the South, and it just hurts her when she sees other people of color supporting a party that would encourage that kind of othering, or who would sort of support, for lack of a better term, racist policies. So I think that was very, to me, those two moments really encapsulated to me a lot of the psychology and the existential, I think, challenges as Asian Americans in America, Asians in America, and the sort of political participation that we have to attempt. So that's just my 2 cents. So finally, let's, so thank you, Yi. That's my sort of thank you for being able to bring us those stories and those moments. That I'm definitely going to take away with me, because 2020 is a big year for elections and our political campaigns. So lightning round, if every single person I'll say your name and then tell us where we can find you online or to continue this conversation. Let's start with you, Kaiser. Where should we find you? Kaiser Kuo on Twitter?
Yeah, so just my first name and last name on Twitter. But more importantly, check out the Cynical podcast and all the other shows in our network. We have 9 shows that focus on all different facets of contemporary China. So
that's great. If you want to learn more, for sure. I feel like that's been an area I've been wanting to learn more, as a basically fluent, but not enough, that I'd like, you know, another sort of perspective to help me.
They're all English language shows. Yeah, SINICA, Cynica. Yeah.
Okay, SINICA, great. Next, Jennifer, let's remind us again of where we could find you online.
Sure, at Dr. Jen Ho, DrJenHO. I'm on Twitter. I'm not really on Instagram, but I promote a lot of things that are social justice and Asian American on Twitter.
Awesome, easy follow. I'm gonna do that after this. Dr. Jen Ho. Next, Chris Hastings, where can we find you and your work?
Go to worldchannel.org and sign up for our newsletter.
Go to worldchannel.org and sign up for the newsletter. Let's do that and support Chris Hastings and documentary filmmakers and public television, right?
Public television.
Yes, love public television. And Yi, you get the final word. You know, where should we follow you and keep the conversation going?
Yeah, definitely. Our social handle is First Vote Film, Twitter, Facebook, our website, firstvotefilm.com. And check out the new season on America Reframed.
Yeah? How do we find that?
Worldchannel.org.
Well, see, this is why we do this.
Easy.
Easy. Worldchannel.org, America Reframed. It sounds like something that I should really look into. That sounds exciting. And then, of course, I'm Jenny Yang TV, everyone. Thank you to Visual Communications. This is our time. Don't forget to catch Festival Programmer Picks 9 Man and Jadoland. Both will be released through America Reframed. See, we were all on message here, y'all. And for more information on visual communications, please check out the website vcmedia.org. It's been my pleasure. You all, Yi, Kaiser, Chris, Jennifer, Dr. Jen Ho, thank you for being awesome.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Jenny.
For making a beautiful documentary. and for letting me yell into your ears. No, this is just what I do. And then now I'm warm. Okay. That's it. Thank you so much, Visual Communications. Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.